Thank you, everyone, for coming out here to Jamf Nation Live in Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. Nick, before you go, what's the saying from Tottenham Hotspurs?
Come on, you Spurs.
Come on, you Spurs. Is anybody out there?
One more time. Come on, you Spurs. Nothing. Absolutely nothing.
I think we've got some Arsenal fans in the crowd today, and that's okay. That's okay. But we would ask that you just refrain from ripping your shirts off to expose your Arsenal uniform until at least 3 p.m. That would be out of the kindness. As you can tell from my thick American accent, I have no horse in this game whatsoever. So wherever your allegiances lie, we thank you for coming out here to join us. We've come such a long ways. Looking out at this crowd, we've grown so much since our very humble days at Tobacco Docks. So we appreciate you coming this long ways to join us, both literally and figuratively, coming all the way out to Tottenham as well for Jamf Nation Live. We have just an amazing day planned for you as well. It is packed with an immense amount of knowledge and content. As you heard from Nick, make sure to get the app and check out your sessions. But even with as much knowledge and content as we have out there, one of the best things about these events and about being in person is the ability to connect with one another. So please, I urge you to use the brand new live lounge area as much as possible throughout the day. It's new, but it's really, really valuable. I promise you'll get a lot out of it. That's what you can't get anywhere else, after all. Connection with the best community in technology, Jamf Nation. And it's interesting because we connect for a very important reason. And obviously, it's really good to see people that we haven't seen in a long time. It's great to meet new people that just share that same common sense of belonging and purpose as we do. But what's even more important than that, and it's something that I think we oftentimes overlook, is that we connect in order to shape the future. I know somebody's looking at me right now and saying, I didn't sign up for that. I just came to Jamf Nation Live to soak in some sessions. I don't want all that responsibility of shaping the future. But it's the truth, and it happens because when we come together, we learn from one another. We learn that thing that we can do better in our own environment. And we bring that back and we implement it. And then it becomes a collection of everything that everyone is doing at their very best that becomes the standard that we all adopt at some point in the future. So that's what we'll do here today. It's an organic process. Don't worry, no pressure whatsoever. But if we're going to create the future, we really need two key things. We need two ingredients of creating the future. The first ingredient is we need a destination. Where are we going? We can't get to a place. We can't even start in the right direction unless we know where that destination is. And number two, we need a vehicle to get us there. We need the tools, we need the capability, not just to get us to where we want to go, but to get us there in the time period that we need to be there in. To get us there despite the complexities and uniqueness that exist within each and every one of the environments that you all operate in. So those are the two things. We need the destination, we need the vehicle. And let me tell you, it's never been more important than right now. We are at such an exciting moment in time for Apple in the enterprise. And it isn't the only time that we've been at the doorstep of opportunity, but it is without a doubt a time where we're all just called upon to adapt and to grow so that we can make sure that these Apple devices just don't have a fit and a purpose in the places that we work, but they have a better overall experience for those that choose to use them. So that's what we need to do today. We need the destination and we need the vehicle. And I'm going to tell you what, that second one, the vehicle, that's the easy one, all right? That one I can give to you right up front, no discussion needed. The vehicle is, dun, 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 Jamf. Sorry, I know. I had you at the edge of your seat. Surprise, surprise, it's Jamf, all right? But that's the easy one because Jamf is a tool. It is the capability. It is going to help you get to where you want to go. And it has the flexibility to make sure that you get all the way there, not just part way there. It has the completeness to match the uniqueness and complexities of your environment. But the first one, the destination, that one isn't quite as clear. And that's something that we have to unfold just a little bit more. But to understand our future and to understand this destination, we must start with understanding our past. Now, for over 2 decades, 22 years, we at Jamf have been on this mission to help this community succeed with Apple. And we exist between that critical bridge between what you all need and what Apple creates. But helping you succeed has meant a lot of different things in our past. In the very beginning, Apple devices, they were an afterthought within most organizations. They weren't supported, and if they were supported, it was oftentimes just left up to that end user to kind of fend for themselves without a lot of IT oversight or even resources whatsoever. And this role that we have now, the Mac admin role, didn't exist. Yet, that role emerged, and it came from places that were much broader than traditional IT. And sometimes it came from places where it was that end user that was just maybe a little too dangerous at what they were doing. So they got the job of Mac admin. I see some heads nodding out there. Maybe that's you. But the point is that you all dared to come together and prove that those Apple devices did have a place in IT. And it didn't happen overnight, but today it is broadly acknowledged that Apple devices, especially the Mac, require specific dedication and expertise. And Jamf wanted to help you, so we created this Apple Enterprise Management methodology. It was actually an entire category. And what that helped us do was put a common definition around what management was. And in the beginning, it was pretty simple. We said, what management includes is basically going out, getting as much information as we can about those devices, making that inventory. Being able to provision or image or set up devices in a multitude of ways. We need to remotely deploy apps. We need to update apps. We need to control all the settings on the devices, and in many cases, remote control those devices as well. That was management. And it was good, but we didn't do it the same way that it had always been done. We didn't do it the same way that it had been done in the Windows world. We did it better. We did it faster. We did it more scalable. Now, more than likely, you're here. You've already accepted this. You understand this. And Apple devices today, they're not only allowed in institutions, most institutions around the world give their employees the choice of using Apple devices. So what I'm saying is, we've climbed that mountain. We've conquered that challenge. Apple devices are here, and they aren't going away. That's the history. Now, also in the past is the revolution that came our way through mobility. We disconnected the device from the desk, and then we disconnected the device from the traditional computer. And we exist in a world today where work gets done, and more importantly, our data is accessed from a multitude of different device types, from wherever our end users happen to be, and whatever networks they happen to be connected from. And no matter how much you try to control that device, the fact remains that now there's an expectation of experience well beyond all of this. Now, this is important because it's led to a lot of other things that are happening right now in the market, which is this undeniable increase in the amount of compliances and laws and regulations that are really just set forth to make sure that our organizations are responsible for the data that we have, that we're secure from those who want to do us harm, and that our users and many times even our customers maintain a certain level of privacy with their interactions with the digital world. Now, this is an area you've heard us talk a lot about recently. We've told you about love and trust. And then after that, it's trusted access. And in each one of these cases, What we're telling you is that we're seeing a convergence in the market. Management and security are really two sides of the same coin. They must exist together. Now, as we're starting to see all of these trends come together of mobility and Apple management, ubiquity, it's starting to shine a light on the future, and it's giving us a glimpse of what's happening in this destination. And this destination is a place that now we can see where all of these forces of management, mobility, security, compliance, privacy, they all work in harmony. The destination is something we're calling the modern workplace. And guess what? It's not how we're doing it today. It's better, it's faster, it's more scalable. And just like we proved years ago when those odd Mac devices didn't quite fit in the Windows world, we sit here today with the opportunity to change how our organizations view our roles, to change that very definition of Apple enterprise management. That category that we created to help define management has evolved beyond the original scope, and it must be updated to meet the modern workplace. It's no longer just provisioning, inventory, software deployment, patch management, settings management, and remote control. It needs to be updated to meet where our users are and what our users' needs are. It needs to include things that bring identity to the forefront, like single sign-on and privilege elevation management. We need to think about securing our users with modern VPNs and zero trust network access so our users can access from anywhere. We need to protect our users with antivirus and anti-phishing. We need to protect our devices with endpoint detection and response. And most importantly, we need to prove, not just assume, that we are compliant with all the regulations and standards that we have to abide by today. So this is the modern workplace, and we are on the doorstep of this opportunity. And what it looks like is multi-location, multi-device, multi-context between business and personal. All these things come together. And as we're on the doorstep of this change, one of the best things about it is that there is no group other than Jamf Nation who is more capable, who is more ready to drive this change. It's you that is out there. We have this vehicle of Jamf that's ready to bring you there, and you all are the best people to drive it. And the truth of the matter is that this started as an underdog story, and it was an underdog story that you all helped write, and together we're going to do it again. So let's get after it. Let's figure out how to get to this destination, the modern workplace. But how, right? That's the first question. How do we get there? Well, there's best practices that are already set up. And some of these waypoints or points on the map, many of you are creating today. But there's some big structural things that we can think about. There's some big things on the how that we can actually implement that will help us along this journey even more. So I'm going to welcome someone to the stage to help bring you through a lot of those. But I just want to let you know, we've been doing this tour of Jamf Nation Lives all over here this past few weeks. And I don't know if you know this, but there's a soccer or football tournament going on right now. I think they call it the Euro Cup. Is anyone aware? Well, we're getting a lot of pressure from these other countries to join allegiance with their teams because, like I said, we don't have a horse in this race. So I've just been on the bandwagons this whole time. But my co-presenter here has made his allegiance clear. Unwavering, he says, I'm sticking with England, baby, all the way. So please, to tell you the how behind the modern workplace, please let me welcome to the stage our Vice President of Portfolio Strategy, Dr. Michael Covington.
Good morning. This modern workplace that Sam describes, it sounds like an incredibly wonderful destination. And when I listen to the description, I can't help but think of a world that is user-centric, driven by device choice, freeing mobility capabilities and unprecedented access to productivity tools. I also picture a changed IT environment, one that cares more about end user satisfaction and quality of service metrics than ticket counts. It sounds like a marvelous end state, and it's one that really could truly revolutionize the employee experience and business outcomes. But we have to realize that the modern workplace isn't just about bringing new devices into our environment. In order for us to realize the true potential of the modern workplace, we need to take a more holistic approach to how we administer it. We have to consider everything that makes the user and their devices successful. And we're going to need to make some organizational and process changes as well. But before we get too far, I think it's really important that we just take a moment and we try to understand the challenges that organizations, many of you in this room, are struggling with today as you work to build that modern workplace. In the world that most of us are familiar with today, IT is sadly built around silos. We have end user computing that's really measured by the satisfaction of their end users. You've got endpoint security that's tasked with protecting devices and frequently disregards end user cares. And we have a network team that really is so focused on infrastructure, they really don't care who or what is attaching to it. And these groups in the IT, they all have different goals. There's no shared focus on an end user. And when things go sideways, what we get is an incredible amount of finger pointing and a lot of frustration. We get frustration with performance impacts because what we end up with is rigid requirements from one team that just gets in the way of what another team has to implement. And it might even cause policies to be worked around completely. We get frustrations with operational complexity because what we end up with is too many agents, too many conflicting policies, too much noise that ends up getting generated in our logs. And of course, we end up with frustrations because the user experience suffers. And let's admit it, in this legacy model, no one owns the end user experience, let alone the power to really control everything, all the different elements that impact that end user experience. All these teams existed in this legacy model because the workspace was essentially the same for everyone. There was no device flexibility. There was no application choice. There was no mobility. There was no customization. This old world that we had, it was rigid, and it really didn't willingly support change. Then came Apple. And when Apple emerged on the scene, we really saw something special happen. Users started to enjoy their experiences with technology. And the reason for it was pretty simple. They were freed from that old world that was constantly breaking, constantly getting in the way of what it was that they were trying to achieve on the devices that were in front of them. But the reality is, at scale, we just can't give a user a device and expect them or the device to be optimized for work. When Macs came on the scene, they were just expected to align with the configurations and the standards that had been established for the Windows world. The environment wasn't optimized for where the user wanted to be. And we had the same thing happen with mobility. You put a mobile device in a user's hands, and they were really expected in the early days to use the same applications, with no regard really paid to this new form factor, this new way of consuming information, the always-on connectivity and the new ways of distributing applications to those devices. The user wasn't in the equation that many in IT were solving for. And of course, this was frustrating for everyone involved, but it also led to a real noteworthy increase in risk exposure. You see, all these new workplace technologies, they introduced new threats. And they introduced new threats that really fell outside of the purview of those siloed security teams that we had. Threats like phishing that started to creep outside of the company email and into other applications that were on the device. Threats like spyware that were actually causing companies to take away that newly introduced mobile tool and replace it with a burner phone that really provided very limited functionality. We had data loss and exfiltration that fell outside of the rules we had in place before, and we had to think of new ways to put them in place, which ultimately got in the way of what users were trying to do. All of these new workplace technologies introduced these new risks, which, much like the user experience, wasn't owned by anyone. And so to enable a modern workplace, what we really need is we need to make sure that we have a workplace strategy that integrates all the elements that are being consumed at one time. Endpoint, application, identity, access technologies. We need a cohesive stack that actually looks at the workspace that the user is interfacing with. In our world here today, that actually means that IT needs to build a strategy that specifically revolves around Apple devices. But let's be very clear, this is not about tooling alone. We actually need to rethink how we approach IT. And we have to really place the worker, not their device, in the center. It's the user that we need to be focused on here, because when we can align IT teams to actually help the worker meet their objectives, we're going to ultimately get to that great destination that Sam described faster. And instead of continuing to operate as loosely coordinated teams within IT that collectively impact an Apple experience, it's time to form Apple centers of excellence. We need Apple experts that really specialize in the rich set of integrated capabilities that support the modern workplace. We need collaboration between endpoint engineering, security operations, identity, infrastructure. All of this is essential if we're going to succeed. The adoption of an Apple workplace strategy and a shift to integrated workspaces and the teams that support them will bring a slew of benefits. It's going to give us reduced complexity. It's going to help us get lower operational overhead, specifically fewer agents that users have to contend with on their devices. We're going to get alignment between business objectives and security priorities, and we're ultimately going to get an improved posture within the organization. Workers are going to be able to work on devices with more reliability and more security, which is going to be great. So for those who already have the remit, it's time to act. We can't wait anymore. If you own the Apple experience, you need to ensure that your Apple workplace strategy is holistic and purposeful. That means enrolling every device that falls under your responsibility. This includes every corporate issued Mac, every personal iPhone, every shared iPad that's used on the front lines. This includes all devices that fall into that workspace definition. When your security leaders or your auditors ask for an assessment of where corporate data resides, and more of you are being asked this in your jobs, don't shrug your shoulders anymore. This is now the responsibility of the folks that oversee the Apple workspace. Show those security leaders and auditors that the Apple footprint is more secure because you have a complete inventory of all of the assets that come in contact with corporate data. And that includes company-issued and BYO devices. Create a virtual team and actually collaborate with security if you're not already today, if you sit in different parts of the organization. It's critical that folks in this room start to think about how we collectively manage the risks that impact the Apple experience and the tools that are ultimately used to control those risks. If your organization is bound to regulatory oversight, lead your colleagues to the correct implementation of the CIS benchmarks or NIST 800 or the myriad of other standards that are out there by showing them the correct implementation of those standards on Mac. Educate your security leaders. Show them the options of full device management versus user enrollment, especially when it comes to mobile. There is so much FUD surrounding BYO management today, and many of you are sitting on the solution. Your security leaders, your organizations, they just don't know it yet because they don't have the Apple expertise that you have. And once the user is going to be empowered to use the device of their choice, it's imperative that we make applications available to them. Not some, all of the applications that are necessary for them to work. And again, this is where IT really needs to meet the user where they want to work. And speaking of users, let's make sure we don't forget that the most important aspect of the Apple experience is to connect workers with those applications that are going to make them productive. Most of you have already embraced cloud identity by integrating with your IDP to make sure that you can identify your users the moment they touch hardware. But why stop there? Identity isn't just about getting into the device. Connect your users to those applications, the workloads, the data repositories using that same identity workflow. Let's enable modern authentication techniques and embrace platform capabilities like Touch ID and Face ID so that we can make those sign-in workflows easier and more phishing resilient. We get benefits on both sides of the equation here. Those connections, though, should not come at the expense of operational efficiency. Establish those secure connections, those important tunnels to applications, but do it in a way that doesn't add bloated or cumbersome agents. We can do this. And effectively, what we're saying here today is don't blindly implement policy. Take full control of that Apple experience. Guide your colleagues to the right choices. Meet their requirements, but still deliver a delightful experience to your end users. When you have the opportunity to do something better on Apple with an integrated strategy, now is the time to be taking that better approach. Last year, we talked about Jamf capabilities to enable a trusted access outcome. And trusted access, for those of you that are new to the expression, is ultimately Jamf's vision for unlocking the modern workplace. It's how we bring it to life. We want to give users access to those critical tools, but make sure that we can manage the risks that they are likely to encounter in that modern workplace as they go out into it. Trusted access ensures that only authorized users on enrolled devices that are secure and compliant can access critical applications. It's the tool set that, again, unlocks the modern workplace that so many of us are striving to enable. And it works because it's cohesive. It works because it's not operating in silos. Device enrollment that supports every device that's in the Apple ecosystem, including work partitions, where it's a personally owned device. Security controls that span a spectrum of needs, from exposure management to threat prevention to user protection and identity workflows. Integrated signaling that ultimately helps us ensure that only the correct users are accessing the necessary applications when they meet the criteria that's been established by your organization. It's time to implement trusted access. But more importantly, it's time to establish Apple Workspace Centers of Excellence where you control all of the factors that are going to influence the experience that your users get on the devices that they're choosing for work. If that means taking full control of the stack and implementing it independently, fantastic. It's easy. That full stack then is within your control. But if it means that you need to take the initiative and create virtual cross-functional teams that are focused on delivering a delightful and empowering end-user experience for your Apple workers, that's great too. We're still going to get to that destination. The important thing, though, is that we start treating the Apple workspace like the environment it has become, one that is truly critical for work, and one that is different from every other workspace that your organization operates. It's time for us to break down the silos. I want to thank our technology partners for sponsoring today's event: Chrome Enterprise, One Global, AWS, GoodNotes, Oodles, and Swift Connect. We appreciate your continued partnership and the ways that you serve and support Jamf Nation. Please visit their stands if you have time throughout the day to learn more about how they can help you be more successful in your roles. We have a really exciting day ahead. I'm sure you've all reviewed the agenda in detail. It's packed. The live lounges are ready for you. Up next, I'd like to bring Scott and Rochelle to the stage to continue where I'm leaving off. As Sam said, we know the destination and we know the vehicle. And we'd like to transition now to a discussion of the things that are available to you today to continue that journey to the modern workplace. Thanks for the time and enjoy the day.